الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. اللهم ربي لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل اللهم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتون إلا وأنتم مسلمون أما بعد. Truly, all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The beauty of what Allah Azza wa Jalla has given us is that He's given us the ability to recognize Him. And through recognizing Him, there becomes an intrinsic reality that lies within inside of us, meaning the fitrah. It's a natural inclination towards truth. And part of the truth of this world is that Allah Azza wa Jalla is the only one worthy of worship, the only one worthy of beginning to do something for. Meaning that in which we take our steps and the things that we begin to aspire to do, they should be going towards God, going towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we seek His beautiful assistance. And again, as we say over and over again, His assistance is encapsulated. You can find the example inside of the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's a timeless reality. It's something that will benefit male and female. It's something that will benefit you in understanding your past, understanding your present, and ultimately where you're going to go in the future. And if you're following in the footsteps of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whoever has obeyed Allah and His Messenger truly has achieved the greatest success. That is something that you hear continuously on the minbar to remind you of the destination in which you are going to ultimately, and to be prepared for that reality. So we seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's assistance, and we seek His beautiful forgiveness that takes manifestation in different ways. Not just when you do something wrong, but also to enrich you, to open you up to different things, and also to give you subtle mercies that sometimes we don't even realize that are inherently within inside of our faith. And also too, it's a power and ability that you can actually give to others as well. That by you seeking forgiveness for others, that by you doing istighfar, which is even much more than just seeking forgiveness when we do the English translation, that it can actually go into other people's lives. It can actually open up doors for them and make their du'as accepted. And also, too, you can become the vortex in which you provide provision for people. You become an actual agent of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You become a sign and a mercy for other people. You become a sign of Allah Azza wa Jall's sustenance. You become a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being al-Ghani, being the one who is the enricher. The one who is rich, and al-Mughni, the one who enriches. So we seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness. And we believe in Allah. We believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The beautiful thing about our belief is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put wisdom in everything. There is a wisdom behind everything. Even though you may not see it directly right in this world, it's almost like giving a baby like a vaccination. Giving a baby a medicine that is needed by a shot. In the beginning, the baby may not understand and it may cry. It may be a little bit difficult for the infant at that time to understand what's going on. It may cry for some time, but ultimately there's good that will come later from the situation that it doesn't understand. Or it's like having a cavity sometimes. When you have cavity, even though it may hurt, when the doctor's actually pulling it out, it's actually stopping a bigger infection that's going to happen that's supposed to go to your brain, that will go to your heart, if it continues to actually begin to develop. So this beautiful belief, there's a wisdom behind everything. And if we have the roadmap of belief, we can begin to see behind the veil. So we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we put our trust and dependency upon Him in every single situation. And we seek refuge in Allah Azza wa Jalla from the evils of our own egotistical selves. And then we become active. And we understand that whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides to guide, nobody can move them astray. And whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows to go down the path of misguidance, nobody can bring them back. And we are witnessing that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah. And we are witnessing that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His servant and His messenger, and may peace and blessings be upon him, his family, his companions, and you, my dear brothers and sisters. Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran, O you who have attained faith, be conscious of Allah, which is His due right, and do not die except in a state of active submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Islam. There's a term called Skinner box, right? And what it is we take a look at it, we look up the Google. It's an apparatus for studying instrumental conditioning in animals, typically rats or pigeons, in which the animal is isolated and provided with a lever or a switch, which it learns to obtain reward, such as a food pellet, or to avoid punishment, such as an electric shock. These are experiments that go on and on sometimes, that we see that they do on animals many times. But also, too, we have to remember that there is a programming that goes on in our society. And we're seeing this in many different forms. Sometimes people can really identify in a very articulate manner. Sometimes it's just very simplistic, but it's actually pretty simplistic to understand. There was an individual named Noble Bruner, which he was actually one of the early computer scientists. Maybe some of you actually seen one of the actual reels on Instagram from this. There's different things. If you watch more of the interview, it's very interesting. But he mentioned something very interesting. He was actually reflecting. He's in 1950, right? So he's in 1950. This is all before what we currently have in our hands. Where he says, if one could imagine a computer that would gather data and provide feedback in real time and almost become a behavior system, almost like a Skinner box, right? That it would be a global computer system where everyone has devices. Where everybody has devices, and that device actually gives them feedback in real time. He said we would ultimately be able to pattern humanity's behavior, modify it, and ultimately we would have such a society would become insane. This is in the 1950s. Such a society would become insane, and it wouldn't be able to face its problems. But it's technologically impossible. That's what he said at the time. So the society would become insane and would not be able to face its problems. But it's technologically impossible. But we're living in the time now. This was 1950, right? Now, the beautiful thing about our way of life, the way of life of Islam, which is the only way of life, meaning like it's the only true reality, is that the Prophet of Islam told us many things about what would to come. Told us many things to give us actually hope, not to make us put into a state where we become isolated or we become, I guess you would say, feel like we're powerless. But he gave us many different signs to actually watch for. One of the first signs is actually that on the minbar that people would not talk about things like this. That we don't actually talk about sometimes the systems in which we find ourselves. And ultimately how to actually utilize the beautiful realities of our deen to actually elevate not only ourselves but the people around us and also to ultimately our community and the world at whole. The Prophet ﷺ says, he said one of the things too, he said, from the nearness of the hour was that a crescent will be sighted and enlarged, right? So there'll be actually things that happen within the world and within the atmosphere and the universe in and of itself. We could see that different things happening, right? Is that, as some would say, like the earth is speaking to us in different ways. That's one. But then he says, and it will be said, it is the second night. So things will be a little bit disturbed. And he said that mosque will be taken as mere fairways, as a tariq, as a path. And that sudden death will become really prevalent. Right? So one of the things is look at the middle, bro. That the masajid will become what? Mere fairways, just paths. That we just come in, pray, and then we leave. But they don't actually become institutions of development. They don't actually become places where people can actually feel safe, or they come in for refuge sometimes. They would just actually just fairways, just that people just go in and out. And that we understand that this is actually the hub. The Prophet ﷺ set up the masjid as a hub for all of it to go on, for beautiful things to happen. So that's one. The Prophet ﷺ says another thing before I get into the meat of the talk. He said there will come at the end of time collapsing cities and stones raining from the sky and the transmutation of creatures, which is interesting to actually watch because we're watching people clone meat into labs now and then we eat it. We're watching the mutation of human beings too as well, changing. Both from a biological level and also to something that's actually forced, changing gender, things of that nature. We're watching this in front of us. We see that we have a system set up with our food. Most of our stuff is modified. And it's having harmful effects on us too. Very harmful effects that actually have been tracked and data has been established. And it still continues to go on because of corporate greed. We're doing. They say that even the food at McDonald's, which we should be eating, right, because we know that it goes towards an atrocity in and of itself. Also, too, it's just not halal. They say that it's actually more nutritious. Has more nutritional value for you, or is better for you at some level. However, the two goes for you to eat the box itself. For you to eat the box and eat it. It's something to think about, guys. But the Prophet ﷺ said, the companion said, when is this going to be, bro? Like, hold on, wait a minute. Like, we're with you, they're thinking we're with you. When is this going to be? And the Prophet ﷺ says, when there is television, or like when it's very well established that musical instruments, singing girls, and the legalization of wine. Now we see this in our communities that it's, music is one thing. There's halal nasheeds and there's things of that nature. But look at what type of, I would say, there's many actually musical artists out here in the congregation. But you understand, where is the trend going? Who's backing some of it? Are they allowing certain people to destroy communities behind it as well? Was that not something that happened? Was it not a huge wave in the 90s and the 2000s where a lot of African Americans got incarcerated behind a certain genre of music? It would be something to think about. And was there an actual engine behind that? Are women sexually exploited now? To the point where they're devalued and everything, and they think they're actually valued. It's flipping. Let's take a look. The legalization of wine, we see this. We see this even into the Muslim countries as well. We see this. The Prophet ﷺ is telling us something, though, right? The Prophet said, hasten to do good deeds before 6 signs. Foolish leaders, proliferation of enforcement, bribery and judgment, bloodshed taken lightly, family ties are severed, and a generation of blood of treating the Quran is a musical instrument in our mosque. They put forth one to sing for them, but he's the least in understanding. These are things, the reason why I mention some of these things is so that we can look at ourselves first and foremost and say, are we in any of these categories to actually pull ourselves out? Because the Prophet is mentioning this to you directly. If you read it, if you study his life, to say, are we doing this? Or do we just turn on the Quran in the car? Not to say not to do it. I'm not saying not to turn it on, but is it just taken as a, oh, this is really beautiful, it just relaxes me, but we don't go deeper into it to understand how is this actually going to relax my community? How is this going to relax the reality around me? How is this going to make change? Do we just take out moments in Ramadan and do it, and we don't really change it? These are things that Prophet is putting to us. And the reason why I mention this is because, again, going back to the Skinner box, or going back to this massive database that is collecting information that we see actually being pumped out to us many times, because everybody knows that Instagram and all these have an algorithm, right? And you see certain things. As you mention more things, it comes up into you to try to either get you to, at first you might see just general, I would say, good intention content, which is really good. Then all of a sudden there's an ad, then all of a sudden there's a sign up, then all of a sudden there's a phone call. There's something that happens, right? But you're seeing something very interesting too, is that through these vehicles, through these vessels sometimes that are actually set up to try to, I guess, coerce us to do something, or try to urge us to do something, you're seeing truth come out of this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does that very beautifully. As that you're seeing situations operating in Gaza that are coming up, but you're seeing people with tremendous faith beginning to show you a little bit about trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Showing you tremendous things that ultimately are shifting your heart at some level and beginning to make you think deeply about what you're involved in and how can you make actual change. And we've seen that actually just from the boycott with Starbucks. That there actually is notable change, that $11 billion is lost, that there has been a complete closure in Morocco, and that it has effect. So you have tremendous effect, especially from a financial perspective, and also to the next level is looking at a spiritual perspective. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses children to show us miraculous things, even if they have passed on to the barakah. As is witnessed, if anybody's seen one of the reels of the mother talking to her son just recently, and that she named him Ayub alayhi salam. She named him Ayub and hoped that she would have patience with him. She named him Ayub to replicate the reality of Ayub alayhi salam. She named him Ayub to replicate the prophetic reality that we need to replicate. And then she finds herself in front of her son who has passed away. And she says beautiful words for the fire of heaven. She says things that should touch you at the core of the essence of your humanity. And as a Muslim, we should see this. And that she has tawakkul to Allah, that she has trust upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I trust in Allah as a wajal. That's what's coming forth from her essence. That you see that she's speaking to him directly. She's soothing him, even on his way into the bar club, to meet the Prophet and others as well, up into the highest level of Jannah. And she says, one of the things that she's jealous for is that he gets to go before. This is something different, a different way of thinking. This is seeing a different reality. This isn't coming from just a hurt place of trying to make sense of it and just making up some lies in our head. No, this is reality. And she tells him, don't worry, say salams to the Prophet, say salams to Abu Bakr, say salams to the other companions, say salams to Ibn Yasir, radiallahu anhum, to all of them. She's giving him glad tidings because she knows where he's going. But the reality of what I want to say is that you see that, and the impact, what makes it so impactful for us, right, is that there's a child that's being shrouded. There's a child that's being shrouded. It makes us even more impactful because sometimes we get hard hearts. And as the Prophet ﷺ said, that death will be taken lightly because so many things are being sent out. Sometimes we take it lightly. We've gotten to a society where if somebody was to go outside there and shoot a dog, right out there, if you saw somebody right out there on the train, shoot a dog, they would make more fuss about that than a human being. You'll see this. Headline news. How big of the Michael Vick situation was that? If anybody remembers a while ago, that was maybe before some of everybody's time and some of this. Not to say that was right, but we see how much of a situation was that, and there were still atrocities going on in other places, even during that time, that 1 million people in Iraq were killed. We're trying, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us these reminders through these people. And I want to remind, first and foremost, myself and also to you, to how do we process these reminders? What are some actual tangible ways that we can process? And I want to give just one story that's very enlightening to me, and I know that changed my life. Outside of the Prophet ﷺ, outside of the Sahaba, that goes into the Tabi'een. This is a very well-known story. Many of you have maybe heard it before, but it's a great reminder because I want to stress again the change that happened from a child, from the death of a child, and how the man internalized it. This is Malik ibn Dinar, right? Malik ibn Dinar, right? Radiallahu anhu. He was one of the great tabi'een, but had a rough start. Was known as a drunk, was known as a highway robber, was known as somebody who you didn't want to be around. But inside of it, just like we've seen many times within inside of our lives, many times within inside of ourselves, many times within inside of our situations, we want to change. Sometimes we deal with certain things behind the scenes that we know are wrong for us, but we want to change. And this is the time, my dear brothers and sisters, to begin that process now. Because by your changing, by your istiqamah, by your standing upright with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you begin to put energy and things out into the world, meaning that Allah Azza wa Jalla brings blessings that begin to change the reality of not only yourself, but the situation around you. And will give you energy and ability and strength to do things that you never thought that you could do before. This is the reality of being upright with Allah Azza wa Jalla. So one of the things is that we dealt with alcoholism, we dealt with obviously robbery and all those things. And anybody who's ever been in the criminal lifestyle before, and I hope that nobody has been here, but unfortunately some of us have. That you understand that not only alcoholism is an addiction, but also to criminality many times can become addiction, especially when you get fast money. It can become very addicting. And that doesn't matter if you're a criminal or a non-criminal. Fast money can become very addicting. Large amounts very fastly, and you think you got it all going on, you can become intoxicating to the mind. So, what ended up happening is he had this sadness inside of himself. And continuously, as we all do when we have these things that we're doing, we're trying to look for outlets of how to change. And sometimes even before we first make our own change, and we all are human. Maybe during the year you've been missing your prayer. Maybe during the year or you've missed something out of your life period. Or you've done some wrong things. Many times it's very easy for us to do what? The first, maybe throw some money in the charity box. For us maybe to help out somebody first and foremost. Sometimes that's actually the first process of us changing. So don't actually minimize it. I don't want anybody to minimize that. That maybe you missed Fajr. And I'm not saying that you should. No, you should be making Fajr. You should be making these things. But also too, when you do something good, ask Allah Azza wa Jalla out of that real small thing that you may think is minute, even though you may be making other mistakes, that it could be the process, or it could be the start of a complete reformation and change. So, in the process, he's in the marketplace. And when he's in the marketplace, he sees that there's this older man trying to barter with one of the people who is actually selling bread. And with inside of that sale, there's actually, he finally, the old man kind of barters with the bread maker, and the bread maker actually goes to actually confirm the sale, and then after he confirms the sale, another man steps up and says, I'll give almost twice as much. And the man is saying, listen, please, we just made the sale, which is improper. We just made this. And I have to feed my daughters over here. They need me. Just like all of you, especially the men sitting here, and the women as well, but you know that your children need you. Your children need you in your life. But not just from a materialistic standpoint, from a deen standpoint, first and foremost. And he had done this with his children. And so now look at the dinar. Amongst all the craziness he's doing, remember, he said in one narration, he said, there wasn't an actual bad deed that I didn't do under the sun. There wasn't something wrong that I didn't do. So amongst all of this, he goes in and he begins to actually now put whatever money that he had on top of the man, and they begin to actually go back and forth. So you have the older man who tried to make the sale. You have the other individual who's coming in with twice the money. And now Malik ibn Dinar and this other man are going back and forth. Finally, the other man gives up. And then he takes the bread and he gives it to the old man. And when he takes the bread and gives it to the old man said, what can I do for you? Thank you very much, son. He said, please just have your daughters make dua for me. And you'd be surprised sometimes how powerful dua is. Now he goes back. He wants to get married. He wants to change part of his life. We all do. There's things that we want to change and we can take certain steps. So what he does is he wants to get married. He wants to have a life. But he has this past. He has this baggage as well. And so nobody's going to marry their daughter to him. So he finds an actual servant, somebody that needs to be free from bondage. He frees her from bondage, and then he begins to marry her and live a some life. Still doing some of the wrong. Still going on with this, but trying to make a change. Finally, he has a child. He has a daughter named Fatima. Rahimullah. He has a daughter. And he says that inside of him having a daughter, it begins to change. And anybody knows that if you have children, or you have children even in your life, it begins to change how you view things. It begins to actually, it's not just all about you anymore, it's about the other. And looking outside at the other begins to change your whole world perspective. Now it begins to change him, but still he deals with alcoholism. So he'll go down into his basement sometimes and he'll begin to drink. And he'll begin to drink until he passes out. And then what will happen sometimes is, as we all have, sometimes our children will maybe catch us doing something we don't like. That we could do better not in front of them, right? So change. And she comes and she sits on his lap and she used to knock the glass out of his hand all the time and say, I don't like this. Because she would notice, just as our children notice, just as our children see the actions that we do. So it's important. They see the actions that we do and they begin to either replicate it, and sometimes truth will come from the mouth of the youth. And so he begins to do this sometimes, and then he sees a change start happening, things start happening, and then all of a sudden Fatima gets very sick, and then all of a sudden she dies. She died very suddenly. And what does he do? Well, sometimes you revert back to the things that you find temporary comfort in, but also hurt you as well. Sometimes we revert back to the poison. That's what also happens with alcoholism or any really type of addiction if you look at it. You get addicted to the poison in and of itself. So what he does is, he goes and he drinks. And then one night he says, and they say it's on the 15th shot by naturally. So he says, I'm just going to drink until I can't drink no more. And he drinks, and then he goes into a deep sleep. And when he does deep sleep, he wakes up in the middle of his dream, and he thinks, and what he sees in real time is Yama Kiyama. And he actually says that he sees and he hears the angels, and they're calling people to judgment. And then all of a sudden things change, and there's this huge dragon-like serpent that begins to chase him. And he doesn't know what's going on. He has no idea what's going on. And he's running, and finally gets to this beach on the shore. And when he gets to the shore, there's this old man there. And he says, what's going on? I don't know what's happening. And the old man tells him very clearly, he says, I can't do anything but maybe just make dua for you. That's all I can do. I don't know. And so there's no help really there. And so he begins to run, and he begins to try to get out of that area. And here comes this serpent still chasing continuously. Like we all have serpents in our lives at some place that we ultimately want to get rid of. We all have something that we want to get rid of, and it's our time to get rid of this. We all have something that we maybe could do a little bit better on, and we all know it, and that will ultimately change a lot of things within our lives if you take a look at the domino effect. But again, he begins to run, and finally he comes to this beautiful pasture side. And all of a sudden he sees all these beautiful children, the children of Jannah. And all of a sudden the children look at him, and they said, that's Fatima's father. Call Fatima. Call Fatima. And so Fatima comes, and he's dismayed. He says, yeah, Fatima, what is this? What has happened? And she said, Father, you don't understand. And then the serpent comes and she tells her to go away. So look, the young girl has strength. The father can't even do anything, but it's the young daughter who can take something away. She said, you don't see what happened. You don't see what this all means, Dad. She said, this is Yom Kiyama. This is their judgment. And this is if you don't change. And the only thing that could possibly help you is that old man on the beach, and that was a metaphor for one good deed that you did along with me when you got the bread for those young ladies. She said, you don't see it. And then what she did was she did the same thing. He sat down. He was so exhausted that he sat down. And when he sat down, she sat down in his lap, just like she did in the dunya. And she recites a beautiful ayah. She says, in translation for time, has the time not come for the believers' hearts to be humbled at the remembrance of Allah, and what has been revealed of the truth, and not to be like those given the scripture before, those who were spoiled for so long that their hearts became hardened, and many of them are still rebellious. And then he wakes up. And now when he wakes up, to track along the story, he wakes up, he makes wudu, and he goes out to the masjid. Some say that Imam Shafi was actually leading the actual salah. And when the imam is reciting, it's the same ayats again. And he clicks, and he makes a tawbah at that point that transformed not only himself, but others as well. And when he made the tawbah, he went back to his house, he told his wife, he packed his stuff, and then he went to Medina to start his process of healing, to go learn in Medina from the great ulama and the great people of healing and the great awliya. Now the interesting thing is when you track his life, there's so many points of his life, and I'm just running out of time, but I want to make this one point. He opened up the floodgate for everybody converting in India. He was the one who opened up the floodgate for everybody who's from Indo-Pakistan. He opened that gate. And one of the first masajid was actually Africa. He opened up the floodgate, and now he's a reliable transmitter in hadith narrative. His miracles are hard known to many. And you'll see many things open up from him, and if you read this story, you'll understand that. Allah Azza wa Jalla gave him power and ability so much so that when he saw a drunk man one time, and I'll conclude on this in the story and to close out. When he saw a drunk man in the same situation that he used to be in, he went to him and he saw that he was still saying, oh God, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. And he cleaned up his mouth and he sat him and put everything nice for him because everybody else passed him. And later on he had a dream, and he said, the angels came to him in the dream and said, you cleaned up his mouth, so we cleaned up his heart. But this is the power and ability that you have, my dear brothers and sisters, by taking some of these amazing stories and taking one point of change and making a complete turn. And just like Malik ibn Dinar, he shifted the whole way in the process that people in the whole land thought and came to Islam. And now you see in Urdu, it's one of the most, after Arabic, has the most commentaries on Quranic narratives and everything, period, on Quranic texts and everything, period. But this is the change of one man who you would think that could never change. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa sallam. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam taslima kathira. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Just to conclude, please, brothers and sisters, understand the domino effect in your life. Understand how the data goes back in your life, meaning that connect the dots in your life. What you eat, where you spend money, what you do has an impact on the whole ecosystem of this world, period. Understand it. Just don't be frivolous of how this all goes. Take time out to transform spiritually, to implement certain things in your life that are in repetition of the Prophet of Islam. Dhikr, prayer at night, those things. But also to allow yourself to actually look into your life and say, hey, look, you know, a lot of times I need to actually change. Maybe I used to go to Starbucks, but go to an actual local coffee shop, maybe. Go to an actual Muslim-owned coffee shop. Maybe you need to buy your own and actually go and look and say, hey, look, maybe instead of me going out, I need to actually make it at home and buy it actually from a Muslim source, as a person that's Muslim that source beans. Food, the same situation. These are small things that have huge effects. There's many Muslim brothers and sisters here that have their own restaurants here. Go and support them instead of actually going out to a bigger name brand or corporate restaurant period. Do these things. We have to look at things differently. We can't just go with the flow of things. We have to begin to change. These are huge changes that will begin to change our whole society. We think sometimes they're small. We think sometimes they're just us turning off something for a while and reading something that I won't really do too much, or why do it? Why start now? Nah, don't do that, please, brothers and sisters. Make an actual change. If you're not eating halal, that's one of the first things. And go to your local butcher shop and support the brother on 3rd Street. Go to make the change. You can do it. You know what? I'm going to actually make this. I'm actually going to take the extra half hour out instead of you just watching TV. I'm going to go through that. And I'm going to go through the whole process of not liking certain things, going through the line. We can make just that simple change. And we'll make profound change. I promise, inshallah ta'ala. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا شر ما قضيت فإنك تقضي ولا يقضى عليك فإنه لا يذل من واليت ولا يعز من هديت باركت ربنا وتعالى اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات والمحسنين والمحسنات الأحياء منهم والأموات وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. أقيموا الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله يا على الصلاة يا على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Showing the lines, please. Close the gaps. Allahu Akbar. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Malik Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا صراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر كلا سوف تعلمون ثم كلا سوف تعلمون كلا لا تعلمون علم اليقين لا ترون الجحيم ثم لا ترونها عن اليقين ثم لتسألون يومئذ عن النعيم. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. Akbar. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Malik Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا صراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Please, everybody, inshallah ta'ala, keep, obviously, Palestine, Gaza in your dua. May Allah Azza wa Jalla bless you. On Sunday at 11 to 1, there will be a tafsir class. Please also do another thing that was mentioned in the khutbah. I know that I've tried to implement it as best as I could in my life. And if you guys need to leave, you don't have to stay around, inshallah. Please really try to actually monitor like how you spend things, what you do, and track the money where it's going. Is it going into good hands? A lot of the righteous, I know some of the students of some of the shuyukh, sometimes they actually take that very seriously, right? Because you want blessed things to come not only into your life when you ingest things, but also to things come out of your life to be blessed and to actually help people. So inshallah ta'ala, keep those things in mind, dear brothers and sisters, and it will make a huge impact on people's lives. You have no idea, you know what I mean, how things can just, a little gesture can make such a big thing. Inshallah ta'ala. So, you know, we should be concerned about some of these things overall. That was one of the great things of the great empires before us, is that many times they would judge their whole actual communal situation on if others were actually worried about others in the marketplace. If people weren't closing down because they met their quota for the day and are trying to give others actually, or allow others to get sales to actually hold up their end of the bargain in their family, then they knew that they were in a troubled situation. And so this kind of, I would say, corporate greed mindset that has infected our world in and of itself, we don't want to be a part of that. We want to actually be trendsetters that change that. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. And if I said anything that offended anybody or hurt anybody or that misunderstood, please forgive me and keep us in your du'as. Also, too, we have reoccurring bills that are going on here. If you please can donate. If you have any troubles in your life, you have any sicknesses in your life, what Prophet Islam said, actually to cure your sicknesses with sadaqah. So this is an actual outlet. You may not see it from a physical level right away, but metaphysically you'll start seeing things begin to happen. So you just got to give it time, just like when you take the Robitussin, hopefully the non-alcoholic one, right? You take the Robitussin, it takes some time, inshallah ta'ala, it's just the same way, but you see better effects. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.